Hello, it's Landon Nagati, a member of Long Line Cares and founder of Food Secure Future, a place for people of all ages and backgrounds to share ideas and learn about the most pressing food security issues. I'm here today with a special guest, Dr. Parke Wilde, who has too many accomplishments to list, but to name a few, he received his PhD in agricultural economics from Cornell University. He's a professor at the Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy at Tufts University. He's the author of the textbook Food Policy in the United States, an introduction, and is a leading authority on U.S. food policy and the economics of the U.S. Federal Nutrition Assistance Program. Hello, Dr. Wilde, and thank you for joining us today.
It's great to meet you, Landon.
So today, I'd like to discuss inflation and its impact on food security. So with that being said, my first question for you today is, how does inflation influence food security, particularly in vulnerable populations?
Your question anticipates people's food security depends on how much resources they have and also what their needs are, including what are the food needs for their family or for themselves as an individual, and what are the prices that they have available to them in the food retail environment around them. So when food prices increase more rapidly, like they have in the last couple of years, food price inflation has been fairly high after a long period of low food price inflation in the United States. So this new higher food price inflation with prices going up faster is a little bit of a surprise to policymakers in the last couple of years. You have to think about, for whom does it sting most? And I've got a special concern for people who are fairly low income, but not quite low enough to be on the federal nutrition assistance programs, because when the food prices go up, their budget doesn't necessarily go up the same way. One fortunate thing is that for people who are on the federal nutrition assistance programs, that those nutrition assistance programs are adjusted for inflation. So for example, each year, the people who manage the SNAP program, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, the largest anti-hunger program, have to check what was food price inflation statistics for the past year, and then they update the maximum benefit accordingly.
Yeah. So what do you think we could do, or what could be done for the people that are just above that income line to get the assistance from government?
I don't know. I think in a way, my mind, because of course, the first thing that occurs to you is maybe we should do something to suppress food price inflation. But the options that policymakers have aren't all very good. For example, there's a history sometimes during times of really terrible food price inflation of trying to write into the law caps on what prices can be. And these efforts haven't worked out all that well in the past. And so to me, as a food economist, the first thing I think of isn't so much changing prices, but making sure that people have enough resources. So when you're talking about that group that you were just mentioning, people who are not on nutrition assistance, but do have incomes low enough that it's difficult to acquire enough food, fair wages is the number one thing that comes to mind for me. Fair wages, and for people who are not in the workforce, an adequate safety net for people who are elderly or disabled.
Yeah, it's a great idea. Thank you. So my next question is, during times of inflation, certain food items may experience more significant price increases than others. Could you discuss which types of food are typically most affected and why this occurs?
So general food price inflation tends to lift all of the major food categories. And the reason is because, to an economist, food price inflation comes when there's too much consumer demand relative to how much goods are being produced. People bid up the prices of the foods. And the actual month-to-month differences tend to be, to my eye, fairly random. From February to April, it might be that oranges and apples and fruits and vegetables went up more than other categories. And from June to July, it could be that meat went up more. And so partly, if you look at each month's food price changes, you can get a little bit lost in the details. And it's good to step back and look at what are the long-term changes in food prices. And long-term, food prices go up for all of the major categories, but it is worth mentioning that over the decades, they've gone up a little bit faster for fruits and vegetables than they have for highly processed foods, such as, among other things, sugar-sweetened beverages. So for people who care about the affordability of nutritious food in particular, it's not the biggest issue we worry about, but there's just an extra little edge to seeing comparatively healthy foods have their prices go up faster over the years.
Yeah. So my next question, we talked about a little bit already, but are there any specific policies or social safety nets that have shown promise in protecting these vulnerable groups from the adverse effects, being the low income and food insecure households?
Right. So we talked a little bit about wage policy, and it's not so much that I would say there has not been a lot of energy and courage at the federal level on wage policy, but especially at the state level, there have been increases in minimum wages. And there have been some initiatives that matter on wages. But for the federal nutrition assistance programs like SNAP, the key thing is an annual adjustment for inflation, which we already have. And the second thing is that federal policymakers periodically revisit the basic adequacy of the SNAP benefit in order to judge afresh whether it seems to be adequate. And one of the big, most remarkable policy developments of the last couple of years in federal nutrition assistance policy is that the last time the Thrifty Food Plan was updated, so this is the food plan that provides the benchmark budget for the maximum SNAP benefit. The last time it was updated in the fall of 2021, the researchers responsible for making the update concluded that even with the inflation adjustment, that the previous benefit was not high enough to get an adequate diet. And so on their own initiative, they increased the benefit by approximately 21% on average. And so that's not just the inflation adjustment. That was in addition to the inflation adjustment, sort of a new assessment of what was needed for adequate benefits. People haven't noticed that extra benefit increase much because the timing of its implementation was at approximately the same time that an extra pandemic-related benefit was being removed. And so for actual consumers with their EBT card in the grocery shelf, they didn't really necessarily see or notice a 21% increase. They might have seen a smaller increase. They might have also been disappointed when the pandemic boost went away. To some extent, these things came out in approximately a wash. But the long-term permanent increase in the benefit, I think, still matters a lot from that fall 2021 adjustment.
Yeah, so pretty much went from the pandemic one, and then it just decreased a little bit after that was taken away.
Right. Decreased less than it would have. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So my final question for you today is, looking ahead, what are some of the key challenges and opportunities related to inflation and its impact on food security that policymakers, researchers, and organizations should prioritize?
What are the key policy initiatives that they should prioritize?
What are the challenges that they're facing, these policymakers, researchers? Yeah.
So, there's a number of big challenges. One of them is that our society in the United States is divided politically in a way that causes all of us who just wish for good public policy a little bit of pain and heartache, right? Because even some bipartisan collaborations that used to happen from time to time have not been happening as well lately. But I think there really is potential for Americans to come together, stay focused on the goal. Nobody, not conservatives, not liberals, not radicals, nobody benefits from having people go hungry in the United States. And so I think that coming together on this issue, setting a strong safety net, does well for traditional liberal goals, traditional politically progressive goals, but it even does well for traditionally conservative goals of making the market economy look like a success and a beacon for the rest of the world that's trying to decide what type of society do they want to pursue. And so I wish policymakers the best on doing better in the next couple of years than they have in the last couple.
Yeah. Everyone needs to eat. That's what brings us all together, I guess. All right.
So true.
So that's it for me. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, thank you for your interest in this topic. I've really appreciated your video series. and the work that you do on food and hunger issues in the United States and in New York.
Thanks.